Hello, this is Dr. Wei Song Lin. I am recording this video for Champs for Trump, which stands for Chinese American Medical Professionals for Trump. And we would like to share some of our thoughts regarding this upcoming election, which is said to be the most consequential election since Abraham Lincoln. And it is for good reason that is considered that way because of the stark contrast of the platforms represented by the two candidates. And we support President Trump because of the platform of President Trump and the Trump-led Republican Party that support the founding principle of this great nation. Individual liberty secured by the Constitution, guided by moral values. And we believe that only in such a society which honor freedom and fairness, reward hard work, and respect achievement can individuals freely pursue their American dreams, and the society will continue to be peaceful and prosperous. And we want to leave such a society not only for ourselves to enjoy, but also for our prosperities. And on the other hand, Joe Biden is just a placeholder for the extreme progressive left that has seized control of the Democratic Party. If he's elected to power in this election, the America that we've known, the free and prosperous country, would almost undoubtedly speed along towards the destructive path of socialism, which have failed in every nation that has embraced it, including China. So we who had lived under the Chinese regime certainly know what we're talking about when we warn you about socialism. And now we have the right to participate in deciding the future of the nation where we now call home. And we, even more so, we have the responsibility to speak up so that we can protect this land from degeneration into the failed country of socialism. We understand that there have been some areas of criticism that President Trump have come under. One particular being the handling of the pandemic, and in related issue, how he envisioned the healthcare in America, and also the rising tension with China. So because of our unique background as medical professionals who grew up in China, and we have seen in both systems, we felt that our perspective may be particularly helpful for those who are still pondering who to support. So first, we believe that the criticism, especially the attack that have tried to lay all the blame on President Trump regarding the ravage of coronavirus on our land, is totally unfounded and unreasonable. Look at it this way. The pandemic was caused by a novel virus that was not well known to any of the experts at the time that it broke out. And that's how pandemic usually happen, because we did not have sufficient understanding of the virus. The initial cover-up by the Chinese government made it worse. So to blame President Trump's response for all the 220,000 deaths is totally unreasonable, especially considering how wrong the responses of the governor of New York, the mayor of New York, and many other Democrats were as well. Many of the health experts were on TV saying that there was no need to wear masks in the beginning of the pandemic. So put it this way: if there is a patient who suffers cancer, and your oncologist had tried everything that he know or she knows and make all the right decision to treat the cancer, but the patient still died. And would the blame of the patient's death be placed on the oncologist? I don't think so. Most reasonable people wouldn't do that. They would objectively evaluate whether the decision of that doctor makes sense, not solely based on the outcome. And so we objectively evaluate all the decisions that President Trump made um, during the course of response to the pandemic. And after doing so, we actually can rightfully conclude that he demonstrated strong leadership leading the nation against the pandemic, quite contrary to the picture that had been painted by the mainstream media critics. Now let's look at the decision to shut down the travel from China in early February. The decision was made January 30th when there were only fewer than 5 cases of coronavirus infection documented in US, no death. And all these cases were returning travelers from China. So at that time, while he was being impeached by the Congress for something that was totally bogus, and he was being called racist and xenophobe for anything that he said. The decision to shut down travel from China, which is the second largest economy and largest population in the world, really was nothing short of heroic. Even more so, um, this was up against all the other Democratic leaders, such as governors and Congressman Pelosi, who intentionally went out to crowded area and tell people to go to Chinatown and eat and go to concerts, take the subway, to undermine his message at that time. So that alone would tell you that he was able to make the right decision and execute on it. Another great decision that he made was the mobilization of the private industry to make PPEs when the shortage of personal protective equipment and also ventilator were one of the major issues facing our medical facilities. So he did that, and quickly the production was ramped up and turned the situation around. And we not only had enough PPE and ventilators, we had more than we needed. So no patient died from COVID-19 because of lack of a ventilator. And during the first few weeks of the pandemic, he was at the media briefing every day, taking questions from journalists, friends, and folks alike, and was praised at that time by even the governor of New York for how much assistance the federal government was giving to the state. So, but what he did not stop at that, because he understood that the nation's well-being was not only measured by the number of cases or even the number of hospitalized patients or number of deaths caused by this one single issue, coronavirus, but rather the well-being of a nation is influenced in a complex way by its economic, social, and religious activities. All of them are essential, and they may be valued differently by different people groups in different regions. But if there was a uniform shutdown of all these activities just to avoid getting coronavirus, the nation will die of many other reasons. And this has become more and more of the expert opinions from CDC, from psychologists, psychiatrists, and other medical experts. So, he urged to reopen the society as soon as the curve was flattened. That shows his understanding of the complex issue. And he's pushing and guiding states to reopen at their own pace as long as they follow certain criteria and guidelines. Is completely consistent with how the Constitution construct our republic with separation of power in the federal systems. Now, these actions help usher in a rapid V-shaped recovery of the economy. And that recovery of the economy helped not only improve the financial situation, but also the health of many people. And now, in contrast, our European counterparts that have been taking more of a shutdown strategy didn't have as quick a economy recovery, and they still have a lot of cases, and their death rates from COVID-19 was not any better than the US. And therefore, um, how President Trump led the recovery after the initial shutdown was also remarkable. And not only that, he wasn't leading it with just a attitude of just let whatever happen happen, but also positively um, speed up the development of safe and effective vaccine and therapeutics through Operation Warp Speed, the um, the project or the policy to reduce red tape created by government regulations so that industries, the pharmaceutical industries and vaccine manufacturers can quickly develop safe and effective vaccines and therapeutics. And President Trump's recovery from COVID within a short 3 days, despite being 74 years of age and also being overweight, really shows these effective therapeutics. So this gives us a great hope that our society will get over the fear of the pandemic and enter into a full recovery and returning to normal life sooner rather than later. All these accomplishments showcase the strength and wisdom of President Trump in a time of crisis. Now, a lot of that wisdom came from the reliance, the trust of our individuals and industries um, that that are creative and striving to succeed, instead of relying on government programs and bureaucrats and institutions to provide for best care for America. And this is not just good policy during the pandemic. This is good policy uh, for everyday care of America's health. Many of us lived in China at a time when the healthcare was purportedly a government provided benefit. But we knew how slow, how low quality and inadequate that was. So in the US, yes, we have different hurdle to get over. We have to look at different insurance policies and formularies. We don't totally like it that way, but compared to a government controlled healthcare, which usually um, would put a stranglehold on the on on the motivation, on the creativity of individual physicians and healthcare workers and the pharmaceutical industry, we prefer the result of healthcare driven by private market and private insurances. And that gave people choice, and choices promote competition, and competition produce good results. So when we warn of the harm of socialized medicine, we know what we're talking about. When the government decides on how resources are distributed, behind the facade of equality of access, universally inadequate access, low quality, and lack of innovation. Ultimately, if we adopt Joe Biden's healthcare plan, it will harm the medical community with fewer and fewer doctors, or fewer and fewer doctors who's willing to explore into new way of treating conditions to improve on treatment, and ultimately it would be low quality of care to everybody. And now we move on to the strained relationship with China. As ethnic Chinese who fled the communist regime to come to the US, we have mixed feelings about the strained relationship between US and China. After all, many of us still have strong ties with friends and families living in China still. We wish the best for them. We don't want them to suffer. But the best we can wish for them is that they can be free citizens of the world as we are here in the United States. And therefore, it's not just wishing that they will continue to have an access to WeChat or connect us through WeChat or something like that. And some of the Chinese Americans are legitimately concerned over potential discrimination in the US based on race and ethnicity as the rhetorics of conflict heat up. But when we evaluate everything that's involved, we still firmly believe that Chinese, whether living in the US or living in China, would be better off or would live better life in a society with economic freedom and liberty of thought and speech. And the latter are not available in China presently. Therefore, we still support President Trump's policy towards China for these reasons. We recognize, number one, we recognize that the only reason that the Chinese people are not free is because of the oppression by the Communist Party in power. When President Trump stood up to condemn the wrongdoings and the atrocities of the Communist Party, it's not an attack against Chinese people, but rather something that could weaken the grip of the CCP on the people and may help bring freedom to Chinese people. In contrast, the platform that the Democratic Party is adopting is becoming more and more like a copy of the manifesto of the Chinese Communist Party. So then it's going to put all the people here in US as if they were under the Chinese Communist Party's rule. Is that what we want? No. And furthermore, the Biden family's corrupt dealing with China will certainly make him weak-kneed against the CCP dictators, if not outright becoming mouthpiece for that regime. The second point is that the CCP is intent on becoming the world dominant power for some time. And they do that, and they're trying to infiltrate the Western world to sow their ideologies into the populations and to reap the Western technology advance to bring back to China to build up their military power. Now, I'm not saying that just making up stories. I mean, the Maoist strategies has been employed by Antifa, which is the group that's creating chaos in many American cities. As American citizens, we expect our president to look after American interests as perverse priority. When there is another world power trying to infiltrate our society like that and trying to change our way of living, we would be irate if the US is not going to stand up to that, but rather continue giving favorite trade policy to China, which in turn cuddle the CCP and weaken the US. The Biden presidency is going to make US more like the CCP control China, and that's not what we're here for. We're here to escape from that control. So one further point about the tension with China, and that is the concern about racial discrimination directed against the Chinese American community. Now, throughout the course of time that we put down our roots to build our career and establish our families here, we've experienced the kind hearts of Americans from all walks of life, whether they're conservative or liberals, and especially those who are holding conservative values that have been maligned by the mainstream media as being racist. We do not see it that way. We have received welcome by these Americans as they see immigrants coming here to build their future and also contribute to American prosperity by their hard work. Therefore, we do not believe that as the tension with China continues, there should be significant repercussion to the Chinese American communities. On the other hand, the Democrats are race hustlers that try to create racial strife in order to increase their chance of being elected into the power. President Trump has demonstrated through his actions and policies regarding minority American that he is not a racist. He is not a white supremacist. So we think that the Chinese Americans' best interests are aligned with his vision for America, which is based on hard work, based on merit, not based on racial quotas. In fact, in the areas that's particularly of interest to Asian American communities, like the college admissions situation, President Trump's administration has stood firm on the side of fairness in admission, not on the side of racial quotas. Now, that's not to say that President Trump doesn't support the Black community. He has done a lot for the Black community as well, including the First Step Act, the Opportunity Zone. Therefore, the policy that President Trump represent and will enforce fairness to all racial background, and therefore that's the one that Chinese Americans should support. Now, if we research the facts beyond what we are fed by the mainstream media, yes, we will be able to come to these logical conclusions. We find that President Trump have done a great deal in his 4 years as the president. The nation's economy was the strongest it's ever been prior to the pandemic, and even its recovery since the pandemic had outpaced pretty much any Western nations. Not only his domestic policy has been successful, but also his foreign policies as well. He was not only firm against the threat from the Chinese Communist Party, but also his doctrine of a peace through strength make him the president that has kept Americans safe without having to start any new foreign war. He successfully eliminated the threat from ISIS and from Iran, and through that strength, he was able to broker multiple peace deals in the Middle East. And that wasn't achieved by Obama and Biden through their 8 years, and not even a fraction of that. So why do we think Biden can do it now? So Biden doesn't have the record to run against President Trump. So the only thing he can do is to running with smear cooperated by the biased media. They will feed us misinformation all day. We can see that in all of President's debates, the line of question had always been framed in a way that's very unfairly critical towards President Trump, while not mentioning much of his accomplishment. For instance, during none of these debates, any questions regarding foreign policy have been asked about um, Middle East peace, which has been a great achievement of our president. Therefore, um, we see that the media has brought the discussion about the pandemic and the tension in China and the healthcare being the major points of attack against the president. So we thought that our unique background give us particular insights that can share with all those who would be willing to listen. And hopefully that's helpful when you're making your decision who to vote for. Um, only about a week is left before the date America have to come out to decide its own future. We will be witness of either the historical day that saw the glorious revival of American greatness, or a day where the socialists stole the country. And with God's help, we believe that America will come out to make the right decision. And thank you for listening. This is Dr. Wei Song Lin for Champs for Trump. Thank you.